Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Kathleen Movito, and I'll be your host for today's webinar titled The Blended Retirement System Explained, Should I Opt In? Joining me today is Steve Gailing, Relationship Manager for AAFMAA Wealth Management Trust. If you have a question during the presentation, please feel free to reach out to us by phone or email, or by typing your question to the bar on the screen. This monthly webinar series is brought to you by AAFMAA Wealth Management Trust. Our vision is to ensure the financial security and independence of our members of the Armed Forces community, active, retired, honorably discharged service members, and their families. We accomplish this by being the premier provider of financial planning, investment management, and trust services for all branches of the military. We are AAFMAA's trust company. AAFMAA stands for American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association. AAFMAA, created in 1879, is a long-standing not-for-profit association exclusively serving the military. We empower military families with affordable financial solutions. AAFMAA focuses exclusively on the needs of military families and provides innovative, personalized, and lifestyle-appropriate financial services. A key point that sets AAFMAA Wealth Management Trust apart from other companies is that we are fiduciary. What that means is we have a legal obligation to act in your best interest and for your benefit. One important disclaimer before we begin this presentation. The information presented herein was compiled from sources believed to be reliable. This presentation is for educational purposes and is furnished without responsibility for completeness or accuracy. It's general information that's not specific investment, legal, or tax advice for any individual. Do not rely on this presentation alone to guide your financial planning decisions. Since each individual situation is unique, your needs for financial services will differ. For individual advice, please contact us directly. We provide this webinar series in-house with our own professional staff as a service to our members and to help them better understand the resources that are available to them. Now I'll turn it over to Steve to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Kathleen. Again, welcome to the webinar on the decision to opt into the new military retirement system known as the Blended Retirement System, or BRS. BRS is a combination of a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan, and was effective beginning January 1st of this year, 2018. If you joined the military after 1 January 2018, you are already in the blended retirement system, and this webinar would not be appropriate for you as you've already made the decision just by joining after 1 January 18. However, if you're on active duty and have less than 12 years of service as of 31 December 2017, or you're a reservist or National Guardsman and have less than 4,320 retirement points, again, effective December 31st, 2017, you are eligible to opt into the blended retirement system. This webinar will highlight the differences between the legacy system and the blended retirement system. We'll discuss criteria that you should consider in your opt-in decision, and then talk about should you or should you not opt in. This is the agenda we'll be following today. The first point is to try and understand from a top-level perspective the differences between the legacy, which is also known as the High 3 or sometimes referred to as the High 36, and the new retirement system, the blended retirement system. First, the legacy or the High 3 system. First and foremost, it's a defined benefit program. What that means is that you as a service member do not directly contribute to your retirement program. The government does 100% of the contributions towards your future retirement annuity. The calculation is in the second bullet, fairly straightforward, simply 2.5% times your years of service and your partial years of service, and multiplied times the average of your highest 36 months basic pay. That's the genesis of the idea between High 3, your highest 3 years of service, or your High 36, your highest 36 months of basic pay. For most members, that means the last 3 years you were on active duty, although it is possible that your highest 36 months are not your last 36 months. But again, that in today's military, that's a very rare exception. How long do you have to serve in order to receive a retirement annuity under legacy? Quite simply, 20 or more years of active duty. There are some exceptions to that for medical retirements and other situations, but as a general rule, 20 or more years on active duty. Or if you're a reservist or a guardsman, it's 20 or more year qualifying years, and that is based on how many points you earn per year, and your actual annuity is based on the points that you earn throughout your career. The last bullet, entry on or after September 8th, 1980, that is the window for the legacy system. Members that actually came on to active duty prior to September 8th, 1980 were under a system called final pay. That is a system we will not be discussing today, as one, it has no bearing on the decision to opt in, because if you came in that long ago, you would not even be eligible to opt in. But I have that on there so you understand the window for everyone who is currently under the legacy system. And lastly, the Thrift Savings Program, which is a key portion of our key integral part of the blended retirement system. If you are under the legacy system or final pay, if you came in prior to September 8th, 1980, you are encouraged to invest in the Thrift Savings Program, but that does not have any impact on this particular briefing, and it does not have any impact on the retirement annuity that you will be receiving from the government. The blended retirement system, as the name indicates, it's a blending of a defined benefit and a defined contribution. The defined benefit portion in the first sub-bullet, it looks very similar to the legacy system. The only difference being the multiplier is not 2.5% as it is under legacy, it is 2.0%. So that is the only difference of the defined benefit portion of this. The defined contribution, though, is in fact brand new and is unique to the blended retirement system. In short, you contribute into the Thrift Savings Program, and then the government also contributes on your behalf into the Thrift Savings Program. The table at the bottom of the slide shows you what those contributions are, not only for yourself, but also from the government. And I'll talk you through it. And the top line, if you contribute 0%, if you select the blended retirement system, you are now under the defined benefit and defined contribution system, and you decide not to put anything out of your basic pay into the Thrift Savings Program. Well, if you do so, the government will still give an automatic contribution of 1% for the grand total of 1% going into TSP. If you decide to contribute, let's say 3% of your basic pay each month, the government will still give its 1% automatic contribution, but then the government will then match you point for point up to 3%, making the total contribution each month into the Thrift Savings Program of 7%. If you decide to contribute 5%, the government will match 4% of that 5% plus the initial and the automatic 1% for a total combined of 10%. If you decide to contribute more than 5% to TSP, say it's 8%, the government contribution is still capped at 5%, but now your contribution or going into your Thrift Savings Program each month would then be 13%, the 8% you put in and the government's 5% match. Other aspects of BRS that are different than the legacy, two big considerations here, and we'll talk about how they impact the online calculation as well later in the presentation. The first one is a continuation pay. Think of this as a one-time bonus payment and as exchange for an additional service. It is received after the completion of your 8th year of service, but before the end of your 12th year of service. The automatic multiplier that we use in the online calculator is 2.5. Each service can set for active duty a multiplier of 2.5 all the way up to 13 times your monthly basic pay. It depends on the specialty, it depends on the needs of the service, and other considerations, but that is unique to each of the services. So if you don't know what that is, then that is something that if you opt into BRS, that when your time comes up, your service will tell you what that multiplier is and how much your one-time bonus will be. If you're a reservist or a National Guardsman, a different multiplier. Again, the minimum is 0.5, and again, the maximum will be 6. And just like for active duty, that is determined by your service. The lump sum payment. This is something that is completely different than anything that's in the rest of the U.S. government, civilians included, And that's a discounted one-time payment that you can receive at the completion of your active duty service, qualifying service, 20 or more years, or as a reservist or a guardsman once you have the time and the points to retire. You can receive 25% of the future value of your retirement payments, or you can receive 50%. Again, it's a discounted payment. It's a one-time decision that you make. If you're on active duty, you have to make that decision a minimum of 90 days before you actually receive your first retired paycheck. During the time period between the time that you receive, say your active duty, the time that you receive your first retirement paycheck and your full Social Security retirement age, which for almost everybody in this particular window, decision window for opting in would be age 67, you would receive a discounted retirement flow from the government, payment from the government to age 67, then you would be fully restored at that age. This sounds a bit confusing. Just think of it this way. If you receive 50% of your future retirement payments up front, then you will receive 50% of your retirement annuity up to age 67, then you'll be fully restored to 100% of what it should be at that age. If you take 25% lump sum payment, then you'll receive only 75% of your retirement annuity to age 67, then you'll be restored to 100%. As we get into discussions on the online calculator, these are one of those variables that you can change on your own and see what impact that has on your retirement income throughout your life expectancy. The bumper on the bottom, you can in fact take some of your bonus money for the continuation pay, that one-time payment. You can make a direct contribution at that point into your thrift savings program. I would encourage you to think about doing that with your continuation pay, but also be aware that there's an IRS limit every year as to what you can contribute into the thrift savings program. For 2018, that happens to be $18,500. And it is the IRS announces 3 or 4 months before the beginning of any calendar year what that new limit is. Just be aware that if you contribute a large sum of money in that continuation pay, you in fact might hit your cap, which again for 2018 would be $18,500 before the end of that particular calendar year, which would affect the government matching as well. So just bear that in mind when you think about how much you want to take out of your continuation pay and put it into thrift savings. Okay, what are some of the things that you need to consider as you're deciding whether or not to opt in? Well, first off, don't think about it too long because the window closes here at the end of this December. So as you're listening to this webinar, you have just slightly over 2 weeks to make a decision. Again, you are in a good retirement system now. The Legacy is a very good system. If you opt in, that again is a very good system. But if you don't make a decision to opt in, if you don't make a positive action by the end of December, you will remain in the Legacy system. So things that you need to consider. First off, how long do you think you will be in the military? If you're on active duty, will you in fact serve at least 20 years to receive a full retirement annuity? Of course, if you know for a fact that you're going to get out, for example, you have 2 years in now, you know you're going to get out at the end of your first term. If you're enlisted, that typically is 4 years. Then, of course, opting in would be a logical decision because then the government will, in fact, match the contributions that you put into the TSP program, and you will, in fact, leave with some form of retirement at the end of your 4 years. Second bullet, you need to consider how much you're willing to contribute to the thrift savings program. If you're going to opt in, for example, and not contribute anything into the thrift savings program, then you won't be receiving the full government matching. You would only be receiving 1%, in which case that would have a dramatic impact in a negative way on your future retirement funding. So you need to think about how much are you going to contribute, how much are you willing to contribute to the thrift savings program. Third bullet, continuation pay. We talked about what the multiplier will be. For example, in active, it's a minimum of 2.5, could go to as high as 13. You need to think about in the future, will I need that continuation pay? What would I do with that continuation pay? Because if I opt in, I am going to receive a continuation pay. So you need to consider that you invest it? Would you spend it? Or what exactly would you do with that money? Because again, that will have a future impact on your retirement savings. Lump sum, we'll talk about some of the things in the calculator that you can do there. But the bottom line on the lump sum is that it is an option under blended retirement that you do not have under legacy. For example, if you plan on staying in 20 years and opening up a business, that might require a large sum of money as seed money to start a business. A lump sum option might be something you would consider. But again, that's unique to the blended retirement, and the online calculator will help you make that decision. Fourth bullet, how many years will you have in terms of government matching if you opt in? The longer the government matches your contributions to TSP, the more you'll have in there in the future years. Last bullet, and I think this is one of the more important bullets, besides are you going to stay in at least 20 years, is how much risk are you willing to take? We'll talk a little bit about the various funds within the Thrift Savings Program, or Thrift Savings Plan. And if you are not willing to take a little bit of risk and invest in securities, then the return rate that you're going to receive is going to be minimal. And that, of course, will have a dramatic impact on your decision as well. So just to kind of recap, what are the things that you need to consider? How long are you going to stay in service? Will you stay 20 or more years, or are you going to get out? 2, how much you willing to contribute to your thrift savings? 3, how much risk are you willing to take in terms of investments? If you're willing to only invest in government securities, your return is going to be quite minimal. If you're willing to invest in some of the other funds you will receive quite likely a higher return, in which case that will have a dramatic impact on your decision. And then, of course, you have other considerations such as continuation pay and lump sum. The online calculator, which we'll get into some of the inputs and a notional run here for you in just a minute, allows you to not only model a lot of the considerations that we just talked about here, but allows you to change things such as promotion points along the way. For example, if you're an E4 right now with 4 years of service and you think that you'll pin on E5 next year, well, you can put that in the model. You can put in when you think you might get promoted to E6 and E7 and E8. The model already has some pre-programmed promotion points based on OSD-wide averages, but if you think you'll be being promoted earlier, you can change that. You also can model, for example, if you want to change and go to officer candidate school. Say you're at E2 now and you've applied to go to officer candidate school. Well, you can model that as well, so you can see the impact once you receive a commission, what the government matching would be, and so on and so forth. The government thrift savings plan. The next couple of slides, I'll talk about the 5 different basic funds that are within the thrift savings plan. These are the same options that are available to civil service employees. And we'll also talk about combinations that the Thrift Savings Board has developed over the years to make sure that you have a diversified portfolio. The first one, the one that is actually, of all the funds, is most commonly invested in is in fact the G Fund. The G Fund is the safest of all the 5 funds. The only downside to the G Fund is that it is subject to inflation risk. You typically will earn less in the G Fund than inflation, so over time you will lose purchasing power within the G Fund. Let me give an example, and all the rates that I will be quoting here, and as we're going through these next 2 slides, are available at tsp.gov. They update these several times during a year. The rates I will give you will be the return rates for the last 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. So in the case of the G Fund, just to give you an example, it's returned 2.33% in the last for 1 year, and this is ending December 31st, 2017, 2.06% and 2.08% for the 3 years and 5 years. So you can see that you're going to earn, at least in the last 5 years, between 2.08 and 2.33% in the G fund. The F fund, again, a different objective. It's, as it states there, the goal is to match the performance of the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index. The F fund, though, has a couple downsides to it. In a rising interest rate market, the F fund will, of course, drop in price because as interest rates rise, bond prices drop. Give an example. G fund, for the last 12 months ending this October 18, the G fund has returned close to 2.8% in the last 12 months. The F fund has lost 1.9%. And again, interest rates have been rising, so the G fund will return a little bit more, but the F fund, of course, the bond prices dropping will tend to have a negative return. That being said, the last 5-year return for the F fund is 2.5%. So the F fund over the long haul will tend to do a little bit better than the G fund. C fund. This is the objective here is to match the S&P 500. The S&P 500 are stocks of large and medium-sized U.S. companies. Of all the security funds, of these 3 funds that you see on the screen here, the C fund is by far the most popular of the 3. The last year return, again, ending December 31st, 2017, was 21.82%. So a very, very good return for the C fund. The 3-year return is 11.45%, and the 5-year return, 15.85%. So you can see that the C fund, and if you were to compare that directly to the S&P index for the 1, 3, and 5-year time period, you would see that it matches it extremely. In fact, it's almost exactly the same. So the C fund, long term, you're investing in the U.S. economy, is a very solid return and a very, very good fund. The S fund. The S fund will invest in small to medium-sized companies that are not in the C fund. So the S fund securities are in fact different than the ones that make up the C fund. Return rates for the S fund last year, again, ending 31 December 2017, 18.2%, 3 years 10.12, and 5 years 14.77. Again, the S fund has done very, very well over the long term. If you were to take a look at the last 12 months, this right now ending in this October, the return has been 3.07. So you can see that it does in fact fluctuate up and down, and is a little bit more volatile than the C fund. The I fund, International Fund. This invests in more than 20 different developed companies. The objective here, again, is to match the Europe, Australia, Asia, and Far East index. 1-year rate ended December 2017 was 25.42%. Again, the highest of these 3 particular funds. But if you look at the 3-year rate, it was 8.41, which again is lower than the C and the S fund. And the 5-year was 8.07, again lower than the C and the S. So the I fund, can it return more than the other 2 funds in any given year? Yes, it can. Is it more volatile? Yes, it is. So the bottom line is that all 3 of these funds invest in securities. There's no guarantee in these funds. They have different indices that they're trying to match. And over time, though, however, if you want to achieve wealth, these are the 3 funds that you need to focus on. The Thrift Savings Board, knowing that some individuals do not want to put all their eggs in one basket. For example, you don't want to put all of your contributions in the C fund or all of your contributions in the G fund or the S fund, came up with Lifecycle funds. The purpose of Lifecycle funds is to provide individuals automatic diversification of their investments. The Lifecycle funds are tied to the year that you are anticipating retiring. For example, almost everybody who is eligible to opt in to Blended Retirement System, you should be focusing on the L2050 fund. That would be about the year that you would be retiring, or very, very close to that. And you can take a look at the funds allocation within that life cycle fund. You can clearly see that the life cycle fund for the 2050 is much more aggressive than, say, the life cycle fund for 2020. Every year, and we'll pick the C fund just to kind of track that through. Take a look at the allocation in the 2050 fund for the C fund. 43% of all contributions, new contributions going into that particular life cycle fund will go into the C fund. 43%, 14% into the S, and 25% into the I. And then every time that you get to a closer life cycle fund, like the 2040, you see that that drops, and then a higher percentage goes into the G fund. And the F fund is pretty static throughout all the years, but the G fund is the one that we begin to increase as you get nearer to retirement. And then you can see that the L income fund, which is all the retired life cycle funds, stays at pretty much 75%, or 3/4 of your investment is in fixed income, and it stays in there because at that point in time, in theory, you're beginning to take distributions from your thrift savings plan, and you want to have a stable balance within your thrift savings fund, and you don't want to be subject to the fluctuations that are inherent in the CS and the I funds. So the TSP board has done that for you. So you have, in essence, professional diversification just by selecting one of these life cycle funds. All right, the online calculator. We talked about it earlier in the webinar, and I think it's important to understand a little bit about how the online calculator works, and some of the variables that you can affect change. What I've done here is I've done 4 runs on the online calculator, and I've varied on each of the runs. I vary one item, and I see what impact that has on the projected blended retirement present value of your future annuity stream. And let me kind of talk through some of these here a little bit. I don't have the screen in front of you for the online calculator, but earlier in the presentation we gave you the address. It's militarypay.defense.gov. You go to that main screen, and it has a plethora of information about the blended retirement system, and one of those sublinks on there is in fact the online calculator. You can access it 24 hours a day. It talks you through the input screens, so it's very easy to follow. And then when you complete, you hit calculate, and then it will give you a projected forecast of the value of the legacy system, and it will give you a comparison to the blended retirement system. It will also break it out in an Excel spreadsheet format between your age today all the way through your life expectancy. Again, what the future annuity payments would be under those systems, and the value of your thrift savings contributions, and of course, as you begin to withdraw, what that would be each year when you begin to withdraw. And I'll talk you through that as we go through the input parameters here. As a component, you're given 2 choices, active or reserve. In this particular example, I'm an active duty member. I'm a grade E4. You see my date of birth and my date of rank. I've been in the service. My pay entry basic date was 1 June 2014, so I currently have in a little over 4 years. I've got about almost 4.5 years in now. As we're running this, I'm assuming that it's December when you're running it. So you came in June of 2014. It's now December of 2018. I plan on retiring in 20 years and 0 months, right on the nose. And the opt-in date, you have only one option when you run it now, which will be this particular month of December. The life expectancy that's already preloaded is 85. You can change that on subsequent runs. In fact, you can change it on the first run if you want. I just left in the default, which is, again, 85. I would recommend that that's one of those variables that you hold all the rest of them constant, and then run that a second time, put 90 on there and see what happens. Put 75 on there and see what happens. So you can begin to compare if in fact you live longer or a shorter period of time, what that might do to your future financial situation. TSP withdrawal. The minimum is 59 years and 6 months. The default here is 60 years and 0 months. You have to begin require minimum distributions at age 70 and 6 months. The default that's been loaded here, you can see 60 years and 0 months. Again, that's another variable I would recommend that you play with a little bit. Perhaps change that to 67 years and 0 months, so that would match your full retirement age for Social Security. TSP contributions. That's one of the variables that I have changed throughout these runs. You can see on the first run that I made that 5% of your basic pay. Second run, 5%, and then I upped it on the third run, so you can see the difference that makes in your TSP projection throughout your life expectancy. Again, I would encourage you to change that a little bit. For example, if you think 5% is a little too much, make it 3%. See what that does not only to your own contributions and growth, but what that does to the government's matching as well. I would also tell you to put that higher, maybe make it 10%, and take a look and see what that does as well. TSP rate of return. The default that's been loaded is 7%. That was historic average for several since the C fund began. Change that as well. We've already talked a little bit about what the rates have been recently for all the funds on previous slides. So feel free to make that whatever you deem appropriate. And again, it's one of those variables that will dramatically change your forecasted TSP balance. Continuation pay, you can change that multiplier as well. I've left the default on there for, again, we're active, so the default is 2.5. I didn't change that in any of the runs. Lump sum, I assume that you are not going to take a lump sum. Again, you can change that, see what happens. And your grade of retirement, typical listed at 20 years, based on based on the department-wide promotions, you'll be in E7. So what are the results? If we after doing the first run, the present value, and I use the present value as opposed to the future value stream is because the present value gives you a very distinct, easy to understand number about comparing the two results. And the reason why is because when you begin to change future flows, that has a dramatic impact on your present value. So present value, easy to understand number, and it's something you can readily compare. So that I didn't show the future value, but you can in fact look at that on the calculator output. There's a graph that shows you what it looks like as well. That's another data point that you can consider. You can see the present value for legacy. The first three runs, they're all the same. The reason why those are the same is because the first three runs, as you can see in the data input parameters, I didn't change your years of service. I left it 20 years and 0 months. Therefore, the legacy system, no change in the first three runs. The fourth run changes because now I put in that I would stay till 24 years and 0 months. And you also see at that point as well that my grade now is EA, not E7. So that's the reason why you see a change in the legacy values between the runs. Present value of the blended retirement system. Again, going back, looking at the parameters for run number 1, we had 5% TSP contribution and a return rate of 7%. You can see what the present value of BRS is. In this particular case, legacy is a higher financial return for you than the BRS would be. Run number 2, the only thing I changed was the TSP return rate. I bumped it from 7 to 12%, ran the calculator again. BRS now is closer to legacy, but it's still, legacy is about a little over $37,000 higher. Run 3, though, things begin to change. If I have my return rate at 12%, but I bump my TSP contributions up an additional 2%. Now BRS has a higher value than a legacy. And the fourth run, again, you are now an E8, so you have a higher legacy because you have a higher annuity. I used a 5% TSP contribution rate, and I used a TSP return rate of 12%. In this particular case, you see that BRS, again, gives you a higher value. Now, why is this important? This is important to understand, and again, this is notional. I only changed just a couple variables in this, but I would highly encourage you, if you have not yet done so, that you need to sit down with the calculator and you need to go through and change these variables and see how it affects your personalized forecast for your legacy payments in the future and BRS as well. If you're not sure how to use it, again, I would highly encourage you to look at all the training videos. JKO, Joint Knowledge Online, has a mandatory training class that everyone has to take before you opt in. That has instructions how to use a calculator. You can always talk to one of the personal financial counselors on your installation. And if you can always take a look at some of the YouTube videos that are online as well, because they talk about it. And to also help you, as you're going through the calculator, there's information screens and help screens on there as well. So the bottom line is the calculator will give you insights into some of those projections. Is it the only thing that you should use to decide? I would tell you no. It is not the be-all, end-all decision, but certainly it will help inform you as to what is likely to happen or could happen if you decide to stay in legacy or opt into BRS. A little background that you need to think about. You've now gone through the online calculator. You have your projections under legacy. You have your projections under BRS. Of course, one of the key criteria, and we talked about it just a minute ago, was how much are you putting into thrift savings, and what is that return rate going to be? The purpose of this slide is to really make you feel more comfortable than anything else, but to show you that during the period in 1926 through 2017, what the return rates would have been. Say you invested $1 back in 1826, will that $1 be worth at the end of 2017? Clearly, stocks. If you put that $1 into stocks and just let it grow, the average during that entire time frame would be 10.2%, and that dollar would be worth $7,353. And you can see as you go through various portfolios, you become a little more conservative, put a higher percentage into fixed income, you have a lower return rate. Why is this important? Well, there's really two things to take away from this. One, over time, the value of securities always goes up. And again, we're talking long periods of time. We're not talking short periods of time. If you look at 2008, you see a dramatic drop in 2008. And in fact, if you look at 2000, you see another huge drop. If you go back to 1987, there's another big drop. That was called Black Monday back in 1987. Biggest one-day drop in the history of the stock market. Can that happen to you? Will that happen to you? Well, certainly it's happened in the past. The past is, again, no guarantee of what will happen in the future, but you can see that over time, the stock market always moves in an upward fashion. That, of course, doesn't mean that if you buy individual securities, and I'll name a couple, like Enron, for example, Sears, Radio Shack, you could go on and list dozens of other companies that either go bankrupt or you buy them at a very high price and then they never quite recover. So what the Thrift Savings Plan Board has done is in these funds, they had developed, in essence, index funds for you. So the risk is spread out over a very wide base of stocks. Hence, when you invest in the C fund, the S fund, and the I fund, the risk is clearly minimal compared to buying individual securities. And again, over time, you see that your investments will, in fact, grow. I'll give you a moment to take a look at this slide. There's a lot going on here. The main purpose of this slide is to depict the different asset classes. When I talk about asset classes, there's really 5 of them here. There's small stocks, which is the darker blue, large stocks, the lighter blue, international, which is red, and then long-term government bonds, orange, and treasury bills. Each of these assets tend to perform differently year in, year out. Let me give you an example here. Let's take a look at international stocks. That's the red. Let's take a look at 2004. You'll see that 2004 through 2007, that international stocks were the highest performing asset class. In fact, in a couple of years, they dramatically outperformed any other asset class. Take 2006, for example, 26.9% return versus the next highest, which are small stocks, at 16.2%. So if you're investing in 2004 to 2007, you might think, gee, I should put all my eggs in the international asset class. Well, take a look at what happened in 2008. Look at the bottom line, lowest return, minus 43.1% for international stocks. So if you had continued to invest everything you had in this 2008, you had the by far the largest drop in that one particular year. Compare that to large-term government bonds, which went up 25.9% in 2008. Huge difference. Now let's just kind of pulling this thread on international. Let's look at 2009 and 2010. 2009, it's back to the highest return again at 32.5%. 2010, it's now next to the lowest at 8.2%. The point that I'm trying to make here is that asset class returns change year in, year out. No one can predict what's going to happen within a particular asset class. So the idea here is to try and diversify your investments, which is that last color there, kind of a gray color. If you take a look at the gray throughout the entire chart, you'll see that there's only one gray box in the second line down, and that was back in 2011. It had a return of 2.9. And all the other years, they're somewhere between rows 2 through 4. Diversified has absolutely no years in the bottom 2. So what does that mean? What that means is that if you diversify your portfolio amongst these various 5 asset classes, you're never going to be in the highest return rate, but you're also never going to be in the lowest as well. So you'll be somewhere in between there, getting what is a good return, but again, minimizing your downside risk. So the idea, again, don't put all your eggs in one basket, diversify amongst all the asset classes. What does that mean to you as a TSP investor? I take you back to the Lifecycle funds. The Lifecycle funds have that diversity built into them. You also can build your own diversity by allocating a certain percentage within all those funds. So to wrap up, should you opt in or should you not? First question I would ask you, do you think that you will serve 20 years or longer? And depending on the answer to that question, you may or may not want to opt in. Certainly, if you're going to serve less than 20 years and you know you're going to be leaving the service, then opting in would make a logical choice, so you leave with some government matching dollars. And then the second point is that if you're going to serve more than 20 years, then I would, and you know you're going to, or at least that's your plan right now, assuming that you hit your promotion points and the service allows you to stay in more than 20 years and something doesn't change, then I recommend that you go back to the calculator, run all those variables that we discussed, take a look at the future financial picture under both, and then make a decision that's based on your personal choice. I can't tell you definitively opt in or don't opt in. it's a choice that you need to make. If you're married, I would highly encourage you to sit down with your spouse. Again, go through the calculator, go through the pros and cons of the runs that you see. Seek professional advice. You have access to personal financial counselors at the installation level, and you have other experts within your service that you can talk to as well. Subject to that, I'll turn it back to Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was incredibly informative. So Steve did an excellent job covering most of the considerations you'll need to make when deciding if you want to opt into the blended retirement system. That being said, questions concerning your individual situation and the blended retirement system are best addressed through one-on-one conversation. So if you submitted a question during the webinar, please be on the lookout for a response from one of our AAFMAA Wealth Management and Trust relationship managers in a few days. If you think of another question later, please reach out to us at wealthmanagement@aafma.com or to Steve directly at scaling@aafma.com. We'll go ahead and break here for now, but please don't hesitate to reach out for us for assistance whenever you need it. We do this every day for our military community, and it is our pleasure. This weekend, you'll receive a follow-up email with instructions on how to access a recording of this presentation, and you can register for future webinars and review past webinars at aafma.com/webinars. If you found this information useful, we encourage you to please share it with your friends and family. Our membership grows stronger every year because you introduce those in your military community to AAFMAA. Thank you again to everyone listening for joining us today. We look forward to our next opportunity to assist you.